anyone can have a brokerage account and a retirement account. I really, really wish someone would have told me that when I was younger. But some people actually get them as 401ks from their jobs, and they don't really understand it. They just know it's there, and they don't know what's happening with it, but they know it's there, and they're excited that they at least have it. And I feel like it's really important to understand some very minimal understanding about investing financials with the stock market. It's very important to have at least a small understanding of what's going on with an investment account or a retirement account. So a brokerage company is something like Vanguard or Fidelity Investments. That's the company, okay? And you can open an account with them. And when you open the account with them, it's either a brokerage account, a money market account, or else you're opening up something like a retirement account, like an IRA, Roth IRA, 401k, stuff like that. Like, you can open other things as well, but these are examples. When you open up something with one of these companies, the company is just there to have the account. You can hire them to do investing for you, or you can use their robotic advisor, robo-advisor, to do some investing for you, but that costs extra money. If you have a small, teeny tiny understanding of what's going on, then you can save that money. So, say your boss gives you a 401k and they're going to do price matching with it. And you're like, well, I need most of my paycheck. Try to do at least a tiny fraction, because that price matching is an amazing thing. If you actually have that option at your job, which a lot of places don't have, but if you actually do, take advantage of at least a small amount of it. And maybe at first, you feel like, oh, I just started working here. This is really hard to get my bills caught up. I had to move to start working here, whatever it is. But if you get to a place where your bills are a little more manageable, raise how much. You might at first be like, oh, you're willing to do price matching up to, say they're willing to do price matching up to 10% of your income that you put into your 401k. At first, maybe you can only afford to do 1%. But once you get more stabilized, if you can raise that up to even 5%, every percent is amazing. Now, your 401k, maybe they don't do price matching. They just have that you can get a 401k. Whatever. The next thing to realize about a 401k is it is just an account. Any money that gets put in there, it's just like it's been put into a checking account. Unless you actually choose something to invest in, it's just sitting there. It is just sitting there. A lot of people, they get to retirement and everything, and they're like, oh, cool, my account has all this money in it, that's awesome and stuff. But it's better if the money grew. If you go in to your account, say you've never actually gone and looked at your 401k before, and it's in like a cash account or a money account or whatever, and that's the only thing it's invested in at all, your money's not been growing. Your money's just sitting there the same as if it was in a checking account. You have to actually pick some things to invest in, and then the investment, you want it to auto reinvest in itself. This creates a compound interest that works for you and grows whatever in there. If your boss, say you work there for a year, and during that year you did a little tiny bit of price matching on your paycheck, and then you moved on to another job, and the next job didn't do anything with 401ks, but it was a job that you were really passionate about and loved, and so you went to it anyway. They had really good health benefits, something. Okay. The 401k and the money that's in there, if you never picked any kind of investment, it's not growing, it's not doing anything. So you've got $1,000 just sitting there, say that your boss put in there, and then another $1,000 that you put in there. So you've got $2,000 in your 401k. This is very, very hypothetical. This is all made up. Numbers, like obviously you would have more than that probably, but we're just gonna try to keep it simple. So that $2,000 is just sitting there, and sitting there, and sitting there. if you had put that $2,000 into, say, an index fund or an ETF that covered the whole market, or even just the S&P 500. S&P 500 means top 500 earning companies in the United States, stocks for those companies, and those companies tend to be growth companies, so the stocks tend to end up accumulating more value over time. Another thing is the, whole money market index fund, or an ETF. Index funds and ETFs are just types of ways of investing. Say you did a whole market. Well, that's all the businesses. That's little tiny small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and also includes the top 500 businesses. Both of those tend to trend 7 to 8% over time. That means that the $2,000 that you had sitting there in a year could have gained, say 7%. Say it was a bad year and it only gained like 5 or 6%. That's still more than it would have made in a savings account, and that's still more than it would have made just sitting there doing nothing. The other thing is there's inflation on money, and money that's just sitting there actually slowly is worth less and less and less because the value of it is less and less and less. It takes more dollars to buy the same odd item 5 years from now than it does now, most likely, because of inflation. So the money actually that you just left sitting there is actually worth less than $2,000 would have been worth when you put the money in. So it's really important to go pick something to invest into. And you might say, this sounds stressful, that's scary, I'm just going to hire someone to do it, or pay a robo-advisor or whatever. And if that's really how you feel, you can do that, for sure. It's better than not doing anything. But if you can just log in and go to Google Finance, just literally go to Google Finance and say, whole market index fund, and some will come up. Or you say, S&P 500 index fund. Maybe you're scared to even do that. Maybe you're like, well, how do I know which one to go with? Go ahead and just say, I'm invested into Fidelity. I'm gonna go look up a whole market ETF for Fidelity, and it comes up and it's like an acronym of some kind, FSCAX or something, and you're just like, what does this mean? I don't know. This is scary. I'm intimidated. Take a deep breath. Take another deep breath, and then learn about it. Just learn about the webpage that you're on right there. It'll say some graphs that are going up and down, and you can say, oh, look, there's this little 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, 10 year. Oh, well, cool. Oh, if I click each one, the graph changes. And then you realize that it's showing if it trends down, or if it trends up, or if it trends kind of along in the middle. And you can be like, okay, cool. If it's trending up or if it's trending in the middle, then even after, 10 years or entire lifespan of it, then you can be like, okay, well, this is probably not too bad. And you can take a deep breath and you can say, okay, I'll read about this one in specific. So you just Google, again, you could say the FSCAX one, and you read about it and you're like, oh, lots of people have some decent things to say about it. It looks like over the last 10 years it stayed pretty steady. Okay, well, if it stayed pretty steady, that's all I need to know. I don't need to know all the details. I'm not going to be a day trader. I'm not interested in knowing every single detail about investing. I don't need to know all the jargon. I don't need to know all the language. I just need to know, is this thing more having an odds of going along in a steady pace or even up? Or is this thing like very volatile and up and down? Is this thing a get-rich-quick scheme? You do not want, with limited knowledge, to invest in something that's, oh yeah, this is gonna be getting everybody rich, everybody's into this. You want the thing that's really slow and boring and dependable. Okay? So you say, oh, this whole market ETF seems steady. It seems consistent. What are the fees on this? Oh, it's 0.0 something. 0.0 something for the fees on it is good. If it's point a number, if it's a number without being behind a point, okay? So for your fees, if it's a 0.0 something, it's good enough. Good enough. So you say, okay, I'm gonna invest money into this thing. Whether you had $2,000 or you had $2, okay? Very, very important. Do not put all your eggs in one basket. You found something that you feel somewhat comfortable investing in because it seems steady. It has slow growth, but it does seem to have some sort of growth over a long period of time. You looked back at it even 25 years before you decided, okay, people seem comfortable with this thing. It seems fine. I'm going to go ahead and put some money into it. You do that, okay? And you're like, hey, it even has dividends that come back sometimes on it because it's invested in all the companies, at least in small, tiny margins, which means some of those companies give back dividends, which means I get a itty bitty baby dividend. Cool, cool. I'll just have that reinvest back into itself. I understand that much. I buy the thing and I tell any dividends to reinvest back into the thing. And then I can just leave it there. Cool. That works for me. I like that. Don't just buy the one thing. It's very important. I always say have at least 3 investments in your account. So your 401k, Roth IRA, I don't care what it is, have at least 3 things. This is called diversification. Now, the thing that you picked out first, in my example, was an ETF. An ETF actually picks little pieces of stock from multiple companies. So automatically, just by picking an ETF, you already diversified your investments. Yay! Congratulations. Good job. You did it. I still would recommend having 2 more. So maybe you're like, okay, I did this. I hear people talk about the S&P 500. I'll go invest in that. And here's the next thing you need to know. Because you're already, in our example, invested in this whole market ETF, investing into the S&P 500 specifically is redundant. There is a thing called overlap, and it is when you're invested into the whole market, you're already partially invested into the top 500 companies by being invested into the whole market. Most people are either invested into the S&P 500 or else into the whole market, not both at the same time because those investments overlap. If the S&P 500, for some reason, it's not expected, but for some reason did super bad, and suddenly all the top 500 companies went completely broke, and everyone was in a scramble to pick the next 500 companies, like it was a big problem. Oh no. Well, you're not just taking a hit on your S&P 500 investment, but now you're also taking a hit on your whole market investment. Both of them are getting hit because they overlapped with each other. So it's really important to pick investments that don't tend to overlap. So how can you do that easily when you have no idea about investing and you've never done this before? You literally logged into your 401k for the first time in your entire life today. And you see your money sitting there and you see that it's not invested into any other things. It's just sitting there. And you're like, oh my gosh, I could be earning something on this. It could be getting a return of like 7% a year. And I don't know what I'm doing. And I heard what you said about a whole market ETF. I went and found one and I put it on. What do I do next? If you are literally someone who has no idea about investing at all, what I highly, highly recommend in actuality is have an index fund. Index funds don't pay that much back. Some of them only pay back like 2%, but they're so much safer. They're an automatic diversification, kind of like an ETF is, where there's a bunch of pieces of multiple companies in it. And with the index fund, I would say put it into either the S&P 500, which again, all you have to do is go to Google Finance and say S&P 500 index fund. And you can even specifically choose one for the investment company that you've already got an account in. Say it's Vanguard. it'll start with a V. Say it's Fidelity, it'll probably start with an F. You know, Charles Schwab usually starts with CH. Just, it'll be some sort of acronym that you don't really understand. What's more important is to read an article or two about it, even though you don't understand what the acronym means, and to look at the graphs from at least 10 years ago and see if the graphs look pretty steady or even slightly curving up as they go along. Okay? That's the biggest things to look at. And then what's the fees? If it's a 0.0 something, that's probably fine. So say your 401k, today's the first day you ever went. You want to invest in it. I am not a financial advisor. I help people with their budgets usually when I do finances. So allow me to be super clear. This is just what I personally have done. So take it with a grain of salt. Read and learn for yourself. Learning about it is extremely important, even if it's just minimal knowledge. It saves you a ton of money and a ton of stress. Technically, over time, you could treat your 401k like it's just that checking account that someday you'll spend the money when you're old. But that money could be growing. That money could be actually growing. So learn just a minimal amount about it. The first thing I would get for the three things, I would get one thing that is an index fund, and I personally like whole market better than S&P 500, but there are tons of people who like S&P 500 better, or even do both. A couple of people do both that I have seen, but most people, it's one or the other. I personally like whole market better. That's my opinion. That's just what I do. I have a large chunk. I basically have like mine split up into more than three, but if I had to do three, I do a whole market index fund. It's not that fast growing, but any growth is better than none, and it's a hecka safer. Index funds are way less likely to tank because, again, it's invested just by investing in one index fund. That index fund is already taking part in usually over 2,000 stocks, which means that if, say, 40 of them start doing bad, and 30 of them start doing good, out of all of those, and then the rest of them stay even, you're still not going to take that bad of a hit. Since there's more than, usually 2,000 stocks in a whole market index fund, you have the opportunity for more chances at growth. And the growth from those usually outpaces the lack from ones that went down, which means that you have a growth and it's steady and it's boring and it's not going to get you rich quick, but at least it's there. So I personally would say the first thing I would get is actually a whole market index fund. I then tend to like ETFs after that point. An ETF does like an index fund where it invests in multiple things, but an ETF can be based on something you believe in. I very strongly suggest that. I personally have an ETF that is based on something I very much believe in, and it wasn't suggested to me by finance gurus or stuff like that, really. It was more, this is something I care about. And because I believed in it strongly, I felt comfortable putting some money investment into it. Interestingly, it's one of my best earners. Something I believed in a lot is actually something that I believe is the future. I'm not the only one who believes that, apparently, because it is definitely the trend forward. I believe in not living in pollution, and I believe taking pride in where you live and how you live is important, which means I believe in environmental sustainability. And I invested into an ETF that is purely all about that. And the one I picked was one that I did research on. There's more than one of them. And again, I look at the long-term trends of it. I look at how much the annual fees are for it. I look at the information before I just jump on it, even though it's something I believe in. And so I picked the one that I thought was genuinely the best, and it turns out I was right. Yay me! Pick an ETF because it's invested into a whole bunch of things. So you're automatically diversifying by choosing an ETF, and then put it into something you care about. Do you care about animals? Do you care about the environment? Do you care about children in other countries? Do you care about, whatever it is, the thing that you're really passionate about? Maybe you're really into fashion. Maybe you're super into food. Pick an ETF that's based on something that you genuinely believe in and you genuinely believe has a future. And then pick an ETF under that category that seems like the best one out of them. That's number 2. Number 3, a REIT. Honestly, automatically you have 3 different things and they're not overlapping with each other. A REIT is investment into real estate, but instead of you actually owning the rental property, you own a tiny share of the company that manages the rental properties. And they're required by law to give 90% of that back to shareholders. So automatically, an index fund, nice, boring, simple, straightforward, steady draft horse. Your index fund is your draft horse. It's just plodding along, pulling the wagon. Your ETF is something you're passionate about and you believe is going into the future, and you've looked at them and you see this one is the one that seems the most steady or seems to have the most healthy growth according to the graphs. It doesn't have bad fees, and you genuinely are passionate about it. That is you feeding yourself just as much as that's you hoping to feed your finances. Okay? It adds a sense of security. It's like putting a driver on the wagon, okay? And that driver knows where it wants to steer the wagon to. The draft horse is pulling the wagon, but the guy sitting there is the one steering where that draft horse is going to pull. And that's your passion. You want to go somewhere that you actually want to go. So your ETF is the guy driving the wagon. And then your REIT is investing into real estate, investing into land, investing into property, investing into things that have an established, almost everyone understands, at least marginally, at least in a tiny way, that real estate gains equity. Real estate goes up in value most of the time. Real estate can be good. Renter people pay money to landlords and the landlords get money from that. Like, you can at least semi-understand that concept. And so you do a REIT. And you, again, look at the REITs, try to pick the one that you think is the most steady, the most consistent. You don't want to pick something that has giant ups and downs in it. You want to pick something that has pretty steady things. Now, there are going to be a couple of ups and downs for almost any stock, but they're going to be the same as each other. For instance, when the pandemic hit, almost every stock has a woohoo right there, okay? Or 2008, the .com incident. Almost every stock has a woo-woo. That's not an up and down that shows that the stock is terrible. That's an up and down that shows that society as a whole was freaking out a little bit. So all of them will consistently share that, but don't be buying stocks that even besides times periods that were like that are up and down, up and down, up and down. Your REIT is just like having a really cozy blanket around the guy who's writing. It's just a little bit of security. It's a little bit of warmth. It's a little bit of coziness. You don't want a REIT that's going to get you rich fast because it also could plummet fast. You want something that's really comforting, that makes you feel secure, that helps you sleep at night. You can go for individual stocks at that point. You can go for, other things at that point. But if it was me personally, this is literally things that I have done. That's me. The biggest, most important thing to take away from this is to invest at all. To get your 401k having investments that auto reinvest back in themselves. Your Roth IRA, go check it. If you've got one, make sure you've got investments in there that are auto reinvesting back into themselves. Pick things that you feel comfortable with, that you feel secure with. And you don't have to go and check them constantly 24/7. You don't have to even check them once a month if you don't want to. The point is to have them there and let them grow. Let them grow long term. But at least go make sure that they're actually growing. Because again, you could, over the course of your career, deposit like, you know, $500,000 into a 401k. But $500,000 that could have been growing 7% per year the whole time you were working, think about how much more money that is. If you are like, man, my head hurts to think about that. Just pull out your phone, pull out the calculator. 500 times 7% times how many years you've been working. It would have been so much better to have even a small amount coming in on that money. It's good to have it at all, but might as well have it grow.